Teacher laughed at a black student's dream. Then he returned years later as her boss. Northwood High School stood, a fortress of standard red brick, its architecture embodying the rigid, unchanging nature of public education funding in the rapidly gentrifying suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. It wasn't officially labeled a failing school, but it certainly wasn't a feeder for the Ivy League either. It existed in a perpetual state of strained mediocrity, straddling the line between the old working-class neighborhood and the encroaching new money that threatened to price its residents out. This duality created a palpable tension within its halls, a silent conflict between the high aspirations of the new and the entrenched low expectations for the old guard. The year was 2008. The nation was teetering on the edge of a financial crisis. But inside room 204, Ms. Eleanor Vance's world history classroom, the atmosphere was thick, not with economic fear, but with academic skepticism. The room smelled faintly of old chalk dust, stale heating, and the musty scent of ancient textbooks, a fitting setting for a teacher who valued the lessons of the past over the uncertainties of the future. Ms. Eleanor Vance was an institution at Northwood. With her sharp, precision-cut blonde bob, an impeccably tailored, often navy or gray, blazer that seemed to ward off the world, and eyes that were perpetually critical, she looked exactly like a woman who believed in order and established hierarchy. She had taught at Northwood for over 20 years, arriving when the area was purely middle-class white suburbia, and staying as the demographics shifted dramatically. She considered herself a realist, a purveyor of tough love who believed her duty was to prune away naive fantasies before the harsh reality of the outside world did it more painfully. The career day discussion was underway, a mandatory annual exercise meant to encourage students toward feasible and stable dreams. For Ms. Vance, it was less about inspiration and more about inoculation against failure. She guided the conversation with an invisible hand, steering students toward professions that offered predictability: corporate lawyers, suburban doctors, steady accountants, and perhaps the occasional interior designer for the more artistically inclined. The students largely played their parts, reciting ambitions culled from parental pressure or career brochures. Then it was Marcus M.J. Johnson's turn. M.J. was different. He was already tall and lanky, his physical presence quiet, but his internal machinery running at a constant high frequency. Unlike the jocks or the popular kids, MJ carried himself with a quiet intensity. His eyes weren't focused on the graffiti outside or the clock on the wall, but looked perpetually to the horizon, always harboring an unquenchable fire, a deep, complex internal life hidden beneath a reserved exterior. He was the kid who wore the same slightly worn graphic t-shirt and jeans, but could solve quadratic equations in his head or fix a broken network router. When he declared his ambition, it wasn't a tentative suggestion. It was a firm, unwavering proclamation. "I'm going to found $1 billion tech company before I turn 30, MJ stated, his voice calm, clear, and utterly devoid of the nervous flutter common among teenagers. One that changes how people use the internet, not just a new social media site. A fundamentally different system for data security and information exchange." The classroom fell silent. It wasn't the silence of awe, but the deep, thick silence of stunned disbelief. MJ wasn't talking about a fun app or a video game studio. He spoke of decentralized communication systems, of ethical artificial intelligence models, of data architecture, concepts light years beyond the scope of their musty history curriculum. His language was that of a graduate-level seminar, not a Northwood High sophomore career talk. Ms. Vance's initial reaction was not a measured critique, but a raw, unfiltered sound that pierced the silence. Laughter. It was an involuntary, deep-chested laugh that sounded as if she'd just heard the most exquisitely terrible joke. Her sharp shoulders shook slightly. She actually had to cover her mouth with a manicured hand for a moment. It wasn't a warm, encouraging chuckle. It was a sound of unadulterated ridicule, an echoing, chilling sound in the quiet room. A sound that carried the weight of her 20 years of low expectations. When she finally regained control, her voice, though softer, was dripping with condescension. "$1 billion company, Marcus? Where do you even get that phrase? Did you read that in some magazine?" she asked, not truly seeking an answer, but setting him up. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned forward slightly on her desk. The moment had moved beyond professional guidance. It had become deeply personal and, in its essence, a moment of social control. She continued, the words now deliberate and sharp. Do you know how many black people, how many people from this area, ever found a billion-dollar company? This was the core of her prejudice, veiled as concern. She wasn't just questioning his intelligence. She was questioning his pedigree, his resources, and the very possibility of his success based on his skin color and zip code. She was setting the boundaries of his perceived reality. Be realistic, Marcus. You are smart, yes, but you need a secure path. The tech world is volatile and exclusionary. The odds against someone like you are astronomical. You should consider plumbing school or maybe becoming an IT technician. A solid job, MJ, something you can count on, something feasible. Her words were not just a slap, but a sentence. They confined the ambitious young black man to a predefined societal box, a life narrative written not by his code, but by his circumstance. In her mind, she was saving him from inevitable failure. In reality, she was attempting to extinguish the most vital spark of his existence. The humiliation was immediate and searing. It came not just from the sound of her voice, but from the horrified, frozen expressions of his peers, most of whom were already conditioned to understand their own limits. A few of the wealthier white students chuckled nervously, taking the cue from the authority figure. Most of the other minority students quickly averted their gaze in embarrassment, unwilling to meet the gaze of the boy who dared to dream too big, fearing the same judgment might be passed on them. That moment, the cutting laughter, the explicit reference to his race and background, the public dismantling of his ambition, transformed MJ from a student with a dream into a project. He looked straight into his teacher's eyes. His gaze was unflinching, unwavering. He did not yell, he did not argue, and he said nothing. He didn't dignify her prejudice with a response. Instead, he simply filed the moment away. The silence that followed his rejection was not defeat. It was the heavy, pregnant silence of absolute resolution. It was heavier than any argument, louder than any defense. He wouldn't forget the sound of her laugh. He wouldn't forgive the reduction of his potential. He simply decided, in that pivotal, agonizing moment, one single, unshakable thing: his life would be the living evidence against her verdict. The solid job she recommended would be the countless jobs he created. The feasibility she preached would be the vast, impossible reality he built. The emotional investment in that moment was immediately and violently converted into fuel. He stood up, collected his notebook, and walked out of room 204, leaving Ms. Vance with a cold sense of triumph, unaware she had just signed the contract for her own eventual confrontation with the future. Ms. Vance's laughter did not derail Marcus M.J. Johnson. It acted as a catalyst, an engine roaring to life with the perfect mixture of rage and sheer intellectual drive. The humiliation he felt was a finite, consumable emotion, but the need to prove her, and the entire system she represented, wrong was an infinite fuel source. That afternoon, he didn't go straight home. He walked to the public library, not to browse, but to sit at a terminal and devour every available white paper and academic journal on decentralized computing and predictive modeling. The old-world brick of Northwood High had tried to wall him in. Now he was building a digital wrecking ball. That night, and for thousands of nights that bled into each other, the only consistent illumination in his life was the harsh, blue-white glow emanating from the screen of his salvaged desktop computer. It sat precariously on a cheap particle board desk in his small second-floor bedroom, casting the shadows of his cluttered world onto the peeling wallpaper of his mother's modest home in the older part of the neighborhood. This small room, often stuffy and cramped, became his sanctuary and his laboratory. MJ was utterly alone in his work, yet more connected than anyone else at Northwood. He had no lab with high-end processors, no Silicon Valley mentor whispering insider tips. His tools were rudimentary by industry standards: a heavily modified machine running an open-source Linux distribution, a frustratingly slow, shared internet connection that often choked on large data packets, and his relentless, burning intellect. His most crucial possession was the blueprint, a mental schematic and a sprawling set of notes detailing the architecture for a revolutionary system. This wasn't merely a piece of software. It was a theoretical framework for a consensus-based algorithmic system designed to analyze financial market trends with unprecedented speed and accuracy, while Wall Street firms used expensive proprietary tools to look at yesterday's data. MJ's system was being built to predict tomorrow's ripples by integrating vast, disparate datasets, social sentiment, geopolitical shifts, and microtransaction patterns and running simulations through a self-correcting neural network. He aimed not just to analyze the market, but to model the global flow of information. While his classmates navigated the social hierarchies of high school, attending football games, parties, and teenage dramas, MJ lived in the monastic world of the command line. His life was defined by the language of the machine, coding in Python and C++, grappling with complex hash functions to ensure data integrity, and meticulously training experimental neural networks on publicly available datasets. For him, the parties were the late-night discussions on obscure subreddits about Byzantine fault tolerance. The drama was the endless debugging cycle of a poorly written loop. His focus was absolute, bordering on the obsessive. He subsisted on caffeine, cold pizza slices, and the warm, quiet support of his mother. His mother, Patricia Johnson, a night shift nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital, was his unwavering anchor. She worked long, brutal shifts that paid the bills but left her perpetually exhausted. She didn't comprehend the syntax of his code or the mechanics of his predictive models. She couldn't tell the difference between a hash function and a headache. But she didn't need to. She understood the fire in her son's eyes, the same relentless determination she applied to saving lives in the emergency room. Often, she would arrive home at dawn, leaving a warmed plate of food, usually leftovers like meatloaf or chicken and rice, covered and waiting on his desk before quietly falling into bed. She never asked about the specifics of his ambition, and crucially, she never asked about the teacher's laughter. Patricia Johnson was smart enough to know that some silences held more truth than any outburst. She recognized the sudden, hard-edged resolve in MJ's demeanor after that day in room 204. She knew Ms. Vance had wounded him and that he was responding by building an armor of intellect around the scar. She chose silent support over probing curiosity, providing the stability he needed to build his turbulent digital world. MJ's ambition wasn't simply about accumulating money. It was a desperate psychological need for validation. It was about proving that his vision, which had been so publicly and brutally dismissed as preposterous, was not only valid but powerful enough to disrupt the very world that had judged him. His journey was a pursuit of professional vindication over personal wealth. To refine his skills and test his concepts, MJ plunged into the murky depths of the internet's technical communities. Under the moniker Nexus, a name implying connection and centrality, he became a spectral presence on highly specialized online coding forums and darknet technology hubs. He didn't brag or seek attention. Instead, he solved the most confounding, difficult problems that seasoned software engineers and veteran coders struggled with. He contributed elegant, unexpected solutions to challenges related to computational efficiency and security protocols. His digital reputation as Nexus grew quietly but exponentially. People didn't know his name, his age, or his background, but they respected his code. They saw genius. In the anonymous, meritocratic world of open-source coding, his talent was undeniable. Yet, in the real world, he remained just Marcus Johnson, a reserved black kid from the wrong side of Northwood High's attendance zone. The contrast was stark. Digital demigod by night, invisible high school student by day. What truly set MJ apart from his peers, and even from most of the programmers he interacted with online, was his ruthless patience combined with a deep understanding of the human psychology behind the algorithm. He knew that a system designed to predict market behavior wasn't just predicting numbers. It was predicting the collective fear, greed, and irrationality of millions of human traders. He coded not just logic, but the logic of emotion. His technical prowess was merely the tool for a profound insight into human nature. He wasn't merely coding a program. He was engaged in an act of constructing a miniature digital civilization, a self-governing, self-optimizing system free from the bias and limited vision of the established world. He meticulously documented every line of code, every architectural decision, treating the project as a solemn, sacred mission. The blueprint, once a chaotic sprawl of notes and diagrams, gradually solidified into a functional prototype. It was still raw, full of bugs, memory leaks, and inefficiencies, but it was undeniably powerful. He named this nascent codebase Ether Dynamics. The name itself was a statement. Ether, the theoretical substance filling the universe, invisible but essential for light and energy to travel. Dynamics, the forces that cause change and motion. His system was designed to find the hidden forces that moved the world's economy, the invisible structures driving all change. It was an ambitious, arrogant, and ultimately brilliant name for a piece of code born from spite and brilliance in a dimly lit bedroom in Atlanta. By the time MJ finished his junior year, he had achieved more in his isolated room than the entire computer science department at Northwood had achieved in a decade. He hadn't just proven he could code. He had built a system with the potential to execute complex tasks at a level that surpassed most corporate technology. The question was no longer if he could achieve his dream, but how violently the established world would react when he finally unleashed ether dynamics upon it. The laughter in room 204 had inadvertently birthed a technological force ready to challenge the very foundations of the status quo. Marcus M.J. Johnson's entry into the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech, was his first true taste of meritocracy, a stark, quantifiable rejection of the low expectations set by Northwood High. He didn't arrive on an athletic scholarship, the traditional route of recognition for young black men from his neighborhood. He arrived on a full, prestigious academic scholarship for computer science, a victory earned purely through intellectual firepower and sheer volume of self-taught code. The sheer relief of being judged solely on his transcript and test scores, and not on his zip code or skin color, was palpable, yet fleeting. The college environment proved to be an immediate and profound culture shock. Georgia Tech, a crucible of engineering brilliance, was also an incubator of inherited privilege. MJ quickly found himself surrounded by privileged young students whose parents were executives, venture capitalists, or had already sold their own tech companies. For them, founding a startup wasn't a challenging pursuit. It was a birthright, a predictable next step in an already mapped-out life. They spoke easily of seed rounds, angel investors, and connections to Sand Hill Road, a language MJ had only encountered in textbooks and forums. His perspective was fundamentally different. For him, the startup wasn't a potential career. It was a lifeline, the only viable escape route from the socioeconomic constraints that had tried to suffocate his ambition. This disparity in stakes created a quiet internal isolation. Despite the cultural chasm, MJ's knowledge and raw skill far outpaced them all. The formal education at Tech often felt remedial compared to the self-driven, real-world development he had executed on ether dynamics. While his classmates struggled with foundational programming assignments, MJ was already optimizing multi-threaded processes and experimenting with advanced machine learning architectures. He often finished the required coursework within days, leaving the rest of the week free for his true work. His cramped dorm room, a sterile, concrete box that felt worlds away from his childhood bedroom, yet equally isolating, became the new operational center. Here, ether dynamics was quietly, meticulously transitioned from a personal project into a secret stock trading tool. This was a critical phase, stress testing the theoretical architecture against the brutal real-time chaos of the global financial markets. He used small, legally permissible accounts funded by his meager savings and the small stipend from his scholarship. He began to execute small, legitimate trades, allowing the algorithm to dictate entry and exit points. The results were astonishingly consistent. The system's ability to detect weak signals and filter market noise was superior to most off-the-shelf trading bots. Slowly, methodically, ether dynamics began to generate returns, transforming his original meager savings into a small but potent seed fund. This wasn't merely pocket money. It was validation in currency. The money meant independence. Every dollar earned by the code was a direct monetary refutation of Ms. Vance's laughter. He was funding his revolution with the market's own capital. It was during a grueling advanced data structures course that Dr. Evelyn Reed noticed him. Dr. Reed, a stern black woman in her 50s who had navigated the deeply white and male-dominated halls of academia and corporate computing for decades, was a legend at Tech. She wasn't fooled by the performative brilliance of the privileged students. She saw through the noise. She saw the quiet way MJ would finish her complex assignments and then immediately dive back into a hidden terminal window, compiling code that clearly surpassed the course material. She saw the intensity, the controlled fire that was barely contained by his reserved demeanor. Dr. Reed didn't just see a brilliant student. She saw a disruptor. She invited him to her office one afternoon, a space filled with bookshelves overflowing with technical tomes and artifacts of African American history and STEM. She skipped the pleasantries. "Marcus, stop wasting your time optimizing my syllabus. Show me what you're really building." When MJ, initially hesitant, opened his laptop and presented the detailed outline of his business plan, no longer describing just an app, but a vast, theoretical framework for a decentralized information ecosystem, Dr. Reed didn't offer a patronizing smile or a cautionary tale. She did the unexpected. She nodded. It was a slow, deliberate nod of pure recognition. She recognized the scale of the ambition, the elegance of the technical solution, and the sheer audacity of a young black man from Atlanta attempting to build the future of finance and data security simultaneously. This, Marcus, is not a product. It's a fundamental power shift, she said, her voice gravelly but firm. It threatens too many entrenched interests. The world, as it is currently structured, isn't ready for this yet. It will fight you. It will try to co-opt you. But you're right. You don't wait for the world. You redefine it. She became his unofficial mentor, offering him not coding advice but strategic counsel, a rare gift that transcended the curriculum. She taught him the unwritten rules of the game. However, to build an empire, to maintain control, you need more than code. You need a narrative, she advised him, pushing a stack of books on business strategy across the desk. You must articulate your vision in a way that is palatable, but ultimately non-negotiable. Code is king, but the story is the crown. Dr. Reed was also brutally honest. She warned him about the harsh realities of the tech world, particularly the venture capital landscape where people like him, lacking the cultural fit and the ready-made networks, were systematically underestimated and marginalized. She spoke of the soft racism of deal flow, the subtle ways doors would be closed, and the pressure to take on a placeholder white CEO to secure funding. They will try to commodify your genius, Marcus, she concluded. Your blackness will either be a handicap they try to minimize, or a marketable narrative they try to exploit. Don't let them do either. Make it your shield, MJ internalized her words. The fire within him was stoked, but it was now controlled, directed. Dr. Reed's validation was the intellectual counterweight to Ms. Vance's derision. By the end of his junior year, he stood at a precipice. He had optimized his education, extracted maximum value from the coursework and the mentorship. The formal degree felt redundant, merely a piece of paper that only mattered to people who hadn't seen ether dynamics run a live simulation. The moment of decision came swiftly. He calculated the opportunity cost of spending another year on campus versus the capital he could earn and the development he could achieve in the field. The choice was clear. MJ left tech a year early. He didn't drop out because he failed. He left because he outgrew it. The classroom walls, though intellectually stimulating, had become a constraint once again. He had extracted the technical resources and, more importantly, the crucial strategic mentorship he needed. The fire within him didn't need a diploma for certification. His certification was written in millions of lines of self-tested code and the consistent returns generated by his algorithm. He left Atlanta with his laptop, a modest seed fund, the blessing of Dr. Reed, and a new destination, Silicon Valley. He was no longer just Marcus Johnson, the prodigy. He was now a founder with a revolutionary weapon, ready to redefine the future on his own terms and prove that the most dangerous form of realism is the one that limits the scope of human potential. Moving to San Francisco was not the triumphant arrival MJ might have envisioned. Instead, he felt like an outsider in the very place that purported to be the epicenter of innovation and meritocracy. The glittering glass towers and sleek co-working spaces of Silicon Valley initially felt less like a beacon of opportunity, and more like an exclusive club whose unspoken rules and coded language he hadn't yet mastered. He arrived with his laptop, the meticulously refined code of ether dynamics, and the deep-seated conviction that pure intellect would pave his way. He quickly learned that intellect, while essential, was merely the entry ticket, not the key to the executive suite. Despite his undeniable intellectual superiority, his algorithms were already outperforming models used by seasoned professionals. Raising capital for ether dynamics was an agonizing struggle. The venture capital landscape was a labyrinth of gatekeepers, each with their own biases, networks, and preconceived notions of what a successful founder looked like. MJ didn't fit the mold. He wasn't the Stanford dropout with family connections, nor the privileged white male with a ready-made network. He was a young black man from Atlanta, quietly brilliant, intensely focused, and dangerously unconventional. His early pitches were met with polite skepticism, often thinly veiled prejudice. Investors would nod, feign interest, then offer dismissive feedback. "The idea is too big, too ambitious," one famously said, clearly unnerved by the sheer scale of Ether Dynamics' ambition to decentralize and secure global data flows. "Your market is too niche for that kind of valuation. You need a pivot." Another, more directly offensive, suggested, "You need an older, white guy to be the adult in the room." The implication was clear. MJ lacked the executive presence, the credibility that only a white male figurehead could provide, regardless of who held the actual technical genius. They wanted to package his brilliance in a familiar, less threatening wrapper. These encounters were a continuous, grinding fire test. MJ learned with bitter certainty that in the startup world, your business card, your network, and your perceived fit mattered infinitely more than your source code. The meritocracy was a myth, or at best an aspiration, not a guaranteed reality. Every rejection, every condescending glance, every thinly veiled racist slight was a painful echo of Ms. Vance's laugh. The anger simmered, controlled but ever present, reminding him of his purpose. He refused every attempt to compromise. They wanted to dilute his equity, install a CEO, or force a pivot into a less ambitious, more marketable, and ultimately, less revolutionary product. He needed the money desperately to scale Ether Dynamics, but he wouldn't sell his soul. He would not give up control, not after enduring so much to build it on his own terms. His integrity, forged in the fires of Northwood High, was non-negotiable. Faced with a wall of institutional bias, MJ made a strategic, audacious move. He had already proven Ether Dynamics' financial predictive capabilities. He quietly sold a portion of his algorithm, specifically the high-frequency trading component, to a shrewd Wall Street hedge fund. It was a limited license, carefully crafted to prevent them from reverse engineering the core technology, but it generated a significant financing stream. This infusion of capital wasn't venture funding, but it was enough to keep the lights on, hire a small, dedicated team of engineers who believed in his vision, and most importantly, retained complete control of the company. He was bootstrapping with the very financial system his technology aimed to transcend. The breakthrough came from an unexpected quarter. Angel investors were often less concerned with fit and more with raw talent and disruptive potential. He met Sarah Chen, a young, fiercely intelligent female angel investor who had already built and successfully sold her own SaaS company by the age of 32. Sarah was an anomaly in the valley herself, a woman of color who had navigated the same male-dominated, exclusionary terrain. She saw through the polished pitches and recognized genuine innovation. When MJ finally pitched to Sarah, he didn't hold back. He spoke of the social implications, the ethical AI, the decentralized future. He spoke of Ms. Vance and the laughter, allowing the controlled anger to ripple through his presentation. Sarah didn't look at the projections alone. She saw the intensity, the controlled anger, and the sheer, undeniable intelligence in his eyes. She understood the deeper motivation. "You're not just building software, are you, Marcus?" she asked, her gaze piercing. "You're building vindication. You're building a monument to spite." MJ, for the first time, felt truly seen. "Yes," he admitted, his voice low but firm. "It's about proving them wrong. All of them." Sarah didn't invest in just the algorithm. She invested in MJ's professional vengeance. She saw the power of that primal drive, harnessed and directed by a superior intellect. She became his first true champion, not just a financier, but a strategic partner who understood the psychological warfare of the startup world. "Ether Dynamics is too academic," she told him. "We need a name that embodies what you're doing, securing information, creating networks. Something strong, modern, and memorable." It was she who rebranded the company as CipherNet. The name resonated perfectly: Cipher for encryption and security, Net for connectivity and network. It hinted at the core value proposition without revealing the full, revolutionary scope of his ambition. Over the next 2 years, with Sarah's strategic guidance and MJ's relentless development, CipherNet broke through every barrier. It wasn't just an algorithm anymore. It evolved into a secure global data platform, a comprehensive ecosystem that leveraged advanced AI to solve complex problems across multiple industries. From robust cybersecurity solutions that protected corporate networks from sophisticated attacks to optimizing intricate supply chain logistics for multinational corporations, CipherNet demonstrated its versatility and unparalleled efficiency. It became the unseen backbone for companies looking to future-proof their operations in an increasingly interconnected and vulnerable world. The small team MJ had assembled, fueled by shared belief in MJ's exacting standards, worked tirelessly. They built out the decentralized network, integrated cutting-edge machine learning models, and secured crucial partnerships. Slowly, meticulously, the whispers began to turn into shouts. The narrative of the young, black founder who refused to quit, who bootstrapped his way against overwhelming odds, and who was building a truly disruptive technology, began to spread through the valley. It wasn't just a story of technological innovation. It was a story of resilience, defiance, and profound self-belief. MJ was no longer an outsider. He was becoming a force, an undeniable presence. The fire test had not consumed him. It had forged him into something harder, sharper, and infinitely more powerful. He was ready for the next stage, not just to exist in Silicon Valley, but to dominate it. 9 years, 4 months, and 15 days had passed since the sound of a dismissive laugh had echoed off the cinder block walls of room 204. That precise span of time wasn't merely a statistic to Marcus M.J. Johnson. It was the duration of a grueling, self-imposed sentence he had just completed. The time it took to transform a whispered claim into a deafening reality. MJ sat at the head of the mahogany-paneled boardroom in the CipherNet headquarters, a fortress of glass and high-end security overlooking Silicon Valley. The sheer opulence of the room, the polished wood, the recessed lighting, the panoramic digital displays, was a silent, definitive statement of his power, a world away from the musty, outdated environment of Northwood High. The transformation in MJ himself was equally absolute. The lanky teenager in a worn graphic tee was gone. His hoodie had been replaced by a meticulously tailored suit, custom-made to fit his now authoritative frame. His quiet intensity hadn't vanished. It had morphed into a chillingly calm authority. He had perfected the art of command, speaking with a precision and economy of language that demanded attention. He was the center of gravity in a room full of seasoned executives. The media had confirmed his status. Forbes magazine had recently published a glowing profile, crowning him the quiet king of big data. The nickname captured the essence of his rise, a black founder who had built his empire not on aggressive marketing or flashy self-promotion, but on the quiet, undeniable superiority of his code and his vision. Flanking him were his brothers in arms, the core team, the first engineers who had believed in the raw power of ether dynamics before it became CipherNet. They were the only people allowed the familiarity of silent communication, sharing knowing glances that acknowledged the improbable journey they had all completed. They, too, carried the scars of being dismissed, and they understood the true deeper victory of this moment. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of success. The final documents for the Series C funding round having just been digitally signed, locking in the next phase of exponential growth. The power dynamic in the room was completely inverted from his early days of scraping for seed money. The institutional investors, the venture capitalists who once demanded he find an adult in the room, were no longer questioning him. They were begging him. They were competing aggressively for the privilege of owning a piece of CipherNet, terrified of missing out on the next great global tech platform. The final figure flashed across the boardroom screen, cementing the triumph. The valuation was $1.2 billion. MJ had done it. He had hit the target, not just the billion-dollar company, but the specific, personally challenging time frame before he turned 30. He had delivered on the most outrageous promise he had ever made, turning a moment of profound public humiliation into a world-class financial victory. Yet, as the murmurs of congratulations swelled around him, the expected emotional peak didn't come. Instead of the rush of triumph, MJ felt a surprising, profound emptiness. The celebration felt performative, incomplete. The champagne tasted flat. He realized the laughter hadn't been fully extinguished. It still echoed in a deep internal recess of his mind. The victory, while financially total, felt personally limited. He had only defeated one teacher and a handful of prejudiced investors. He knew that the glory had to be completed, It had to be transmuted from personal achievement into systemic change. His success was too large, too symbolic, to be contained within the walls of a boardroom. He understood his journey was no longer about personal revenge, but about professional vindication for all the underestimated, for the marginalized, for every gifted mind told their ambition was inappropriate for their background, for those who were told to be realistic. He had achieved the dream, but now he had to return to the specific place where the dream had been declared invalid and use his power to fundamentally alter the landscape. He interrupted the celebratory silence with a calm, deliberate clarity. "I appreciate the enthusiasm for this valuation," MJ said, his voice cutting through the congratulations. "But it is merely a metric. Our focus now must be on expansion and diversification, not just of our product, but of our source of talent." He paused, his eyes turning away from the financial metrics on the screen and looking east. "We will be establishing our second corporate headquarters immediately, not a satellite office. A major strategic multi-million-dollar commitment." His COO, a seasoned Silicon Valley veteran, interjected, "Marcus, we should consider Europe for market access. Or maybe Texas for tax incentives." MJ offered a slight dismissive wave of his hand. "No, the location is set. We are returning to Atlanta, Georgia." A stunned silence followed. Atlanta was a tech hub, but not a primary corporate headquarters destination. "Why Atlanta?" the COO asked, baffled. "Because the fight isn't over when you win. It's over when you change the rules of the game," MJ replied, a flicker of the old fire briefly appearing in his eyes. "We built CipherNet on the principle that potential is universal. We are going back to prove it, starting at the source." The realization dawned on the others. The next mission wasn't about technology. It was about people. It was about using the infrastructure of his success to tear down the brick wall of low expectation. He was going back to Northwood High. He was taking his billion-dollar reality and placing it squarely on the doorstep of Ms. Eleanor Vance. The vindication would not be final until she witnessed, firsthand, the empire built from the wreckage of her ridicule. The decision to establish CipherNet's secondary headquarters in Atlanta was executed with the same ruthless precision MJ applied to his algorithms. It was not a gesture of sentimental homecoming, nor a simple search for lower operating costs. It was a strategic return, a calculated move designed to be a loud, undeniable statement of power and disruption, a direct challenge to the very systems that had tried to contain him. Atlanta, the self-proclaimed capital of the New South, was already a tech hub, but one struggling to bridge the gap between its legacy industries and the futuristic demands of the digital economy. MJ, arriving with a billion-dollar valuation and a narrative of resilience, positioned himself not just as a participant, but as a redefiner of the city's future. His first move was a symbolic masterstroke. He purchased a massive vacant office tower in the central downtown area, a glass and concrete behemoth that had stood empty since the 2008 financial crisis, a silent monument to the very economic failure that had shaped his formative years. He didn't just renovate it, he oversaw its complete transformation into an architectural marvel. A striking structure of glass and steel that shot skyward, reflecting the city skyline and embodying the relentless forward motion of his company. It was to be a beacon of digital innovation, a visible middle finger to the old money establishment. This wasn't just aesthetics, it was a socio-economic maneuver. MJ's hiring strategy was revolutionary by Silicon Valley standards. He consciously bypassed the traditional pipeline and began recruiting heavily from historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, Morehouse, Spelman, Clark Atlanta University, and from local STEM programs that focused on outreach to underserved communities. His rationale was simple, yet profound. Talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. The graduates from these institutions often possess the same or even superior intellectual fire as their peers on the West Coast, but lacked the initial networking advantage. By hiring them, MJ wasn't engaging in charity. He was building the smarter company. He created a diverse and elite workforce, a concentrated pool of undertapped genius that operated with a fierce loyalty to his vision and a shared understanding of the hurdles overcome. CipherNet Atlanta quickly became known for its vibrant, diverse, and exceptionally talented engineering teams, directly challenging the monochromatic, insular stereotype of the Silicon Valley elite. The local media treated his return as nothing short of a coronation. MJ was celebrated as a hometown hero. His face graced magazine covers. The news declared, "Young tech billionaire returns home to invest in the future." His story resonated deeply within the city's black professional class, providing a powerful, tangible example of the heights that could be reached despite systemic barriers. His presence injected both capital and, more importantly, hope into the local ecosystem. Meanwhile, back in the aging infrastructure of Northwood High, life continued its slow, painful descent. The school was battling the dual scourges of severe budget cuts and crushing low morale. The computer labs were relics, the textbooks outdated, and the general atmosphere was one of quiet resignation. Ms. Vance, still patrolling the halls and presiding over room 204, was weathering her own slow decline. She was fighting a Sisyphean battle against overcrowded classes and the suffocating inertia of an old bureaucratic school system. She hadn't seen a significant budget increase for materials in years. The dreams she once scoffed at seemed childishly distant. The name Marcus Johnson had been scrubbed from her active memory, filed away as a minor incident. A student with a difficult attitude problem who inevitably must have settled into a solid job, perhaps a mid-level manager at a local IT firm. She couldn't, or wouldn't, connect the image of the stoic young sophomore with the relentless, suited mogul dominating the city headlines. The cognitive dissonance was too great for her established worldview to handle. She saw the news but filtered out the name, dismissing it as just another tech story. She had forgotten MJ, but MJ had not forgotten her. The core of his purpose remained rooted in that classroom. The magnificent glass tower of CipherNet was just the scaffolding. The true structure of his plan was still centered on correcting the historical record in room 204. He knew that before he could truly move forward, the symbolic score had to be settled, and the infrastructure of disappointment that Ms. Vance personified had to be dismantled. The stage was set for the return of the prodigal son, not for a reunion, but for a reckoning. The formal announcement of Project Bridge was a masterclass in corporate social responsibility, leveraged for personal, targeted strategic goals. MJ didn't debut it in a sterile press release. He unveiled it at a high-profile luncheon with the mayor of Atlanta, key school board members, and prominent community leaders. The initiative was a colossal pledge, $50 million from CipherNet's recently closed Series C funding, dedicated to completely refitting the computer labs in 25 underserved public high schools across the ATL metro area. The core of Project Bridge was revolutionary. The goal wasn't merely a hardware upgrade, replacing sluggish Pentium Vs with shiny new MacBooks. It was a complete overhaul of the pedagogical approach. CipherNet was funding and co-designing a specialized, cutting-edge curriculum focusing on the skills MJ himself had mastered: ethical artificial intelligence, AI modeling, blockchain architecture, data security protocols, and entrepreneurial finance. This wasn't vocational training. It was the creation of a direct, accelerated pipeline from the underserved classroom straight into the highest levels of the tech industry. MJ made sure the narrative was clear. We aren't donating computers. We are investing in intellectual infrastructure. We are building the next generation of founders, not just employees. We are bridging the economic and technological divide. The naming itself, Project Bridge, carried multiple layers of meaning. Bridging the wealth gap, bridging the skills gap, and for MJ, bridging the 9-year chasm between the boy in room 204 and the CEO of CipherNet. The selection of Northwood High as the very first school to receive the full, multi-million-dollar renovation package was publicly attributed to its historical significance and demonstrated need. In truth, it was the result of MJ's quiet executive mandate. Northwood High was first on the list because it was the starting line of his personal race. The decision was framed as a benevolent act, a generous return to the community that had birthed him. But underneath the philanthropic veneer, it was a calculated strategic move. MJ needed a stage, a highly visible platform where the contrast between his past and his present could be fully illuminated. He needed direct exposure to the site of his deepest humiliation. The school administration, grappling with dwindling budgets and the threat of state takeover, reacted with unbridled euphoria. The current principal, Dr. Alton Hayes, a man focused on modernization, unlike the old guard from MJ's time, was ecstatic. A $50 million initiative meant a complete reversal of fortune for his school, a guarantee of local media coverage, and a profound boost to student enrollment and morale. The initial informational meeting at Northwood High was organized as a major event, drawing local politicians and community leaders, all eager to align themselves with the burgeoning success of Marcus Johnson. But MJ, ever the strategic mind, did not attend the first meeting. He was not going to waste the dramatic weight of his first return on logistics and paperwork. He sent his chief technology officer, Dr. Julian Hayes, no relation to the principal, and his head of community development. This was a deliberate act of timing his presence. MJ understood the power of the delayed reveal, the slow buildup of expectation. His subordinates, professional and articulate, handled the technical specifications, the floor plans for the new labs, and the curriculum integration schedules. They ensured that every teacher, every administrator, and particularly the chair of the curriculum committee, Ms. Vance, was fully briefed and emotionally invested in the transformation before he made his entrance. During this preparatory phase, MJ's team was quietly gathering intelligence. They asked for faculty rosters, committee assignments, and the history of certain classroom spaces. MJ knew exactly where room 204 was. He knew that Ms. Eleanor Vance was the curriculum committee chair, a position that would guarantee her unavoidable, close interaction with his team, and eventually, with him, he was meticulous about the optics. He needed to ensure the confrontation unfolded exactly on his terms. It couldn't be a random hallway encounter or a petty ambush. It had to be a necessary professional interaction where he, as the benefactor, the CEO, and the ultimate decision-maker, held all the leverage, and she, as a subordinate, had no choice but to participate. In his Atlanta Tower office overlooking the entire city skyline, MJ reviewed the Northwood floor plans and the faculty contact list. When he saw the name Eleanor Vance, he felt a cold, familiar knot tighten in his chest. It wasn't the visceral rage of a boy, but the controlled calculation of a general. The $50 million was the bomb he was dropping. The confrontation with Ms. Vance was the precise, necessary incision to complete his victory. He wasn't just giving back. He was returning to reclaim a moment, to rewrite history, not in a book, but in the institutional memory of the place that had once tried to erase him. He was ready to stop sending proxies and walk onto his stage. Ms. Eleanor Vance was not prone to vague anxieties. Her worries were typically concrete: budget shortfalls, declining test scores, or overdue paperwork. Yet an unfamiliar, cold sense of unease had begun to creep into her usually ordered world. The flurry of activity surrounding Project Bridge was overwhelming. The young, hyper-competent CipherNet team members, always referring to their CEO with hushed reverence, spoke a language of AI and blockchain that sounded like science fiction in the hallowed, dusty halls of Northwood High. The first concrete fragment of the truth came during an exasperated break in the teacher's lounge. A younger colleague, scrolling through an article on her phone, mentioned the generous benefactor. Can you believe it, Eleanor? An alumnus billionaire funding all this. Marcus Johnson is his name. The guy's barely 30. Imagine being that rich. The name, Marcus Johnson, initially registered as a vague familiarity, a common name perhaps. Ms. Vance had taught literally thousands of students over her 20-plus years. She couldn't immediately place him. She mentally scanned her roster of high achievers and troublemakers, but the name didn't stick out with any immediate significance. She dismissed the moment, focusing instead on the superior attitude of the CipherNet logistics manager, who had just demanded the removal of all obsolete computing equipment from room 204. However, the universe, driven by MJ's precise calculation, insisted on providing the full picture. The next morning, a copy of the Atlanta Business Chronicle was left on her desk, the feature story dedicated entirely to CipherNet's move to the city and the launch of Project Bridge. His face stared out from the glossy page, a formal, striking photograph. When she saw his picture, the mundane office environment dissolved. Time compressed. The man in the photograph, impeccably dressed and radiating controlled power, was undeniably the boy from room 204. The realization was not a slow dawning, but a violent flood of memory. She saw the eyes, the same unflinching, fiercely intelligent gaze that had met her ridicule 9 years prior. She recognized the intensity, now matured from teenage defiance into executive authority. The realization hit her with the physical force of a blow to the chest, and then the sound. The sickening, undeniable memory of her own cold, sharp laughter echoed in the silence of her mind. She recalled the boy's arrogance, his outrageous claim, and the casual, dismissive way she had suggested he aim for a trade school instead of a billion-dollar empire. A powerful, disorienting feeling of dread crept up her spine. It was the raw, paralyzing fear of a predator who suddenly realizes they have become the prey. The benefactor was not some faceless titan. He was the child she had tried to crush. Her immediate psychological defense mechanism was rationalization. Surely he wouldn't remember, she whispered to herself, hoping the vastness of his success would have erased such a trivial high school slight. People like that don't hold on to petty things. But a deeper, colder part of her knew better. She remembered the quality of his silence, the unwavering look in his eyes, a look that had promised vengeance, not with violence, but with achievement. She launched into a desperate scramble to justify her past actions. She told herself she had done what a teacher should do, taught realism. She had merely prepared him for the tough world, for the stacked deck. It was her job to save him from the heartache of overreaching. She was helping him. This lie, repeated internally, was the foundation of her psychological fortress. Desperate for ammunition, she spent a frantic hour after school digging through the dusty, digital archives of old student records, finally locating MJ's file. She needed proof that he had always been a challenging case, a disruptive force. The file confirmed her immediate memory. He was a good student, she realized, scoring exceptionally high in math and science. But the conduct notes were there too, confirming her bias, questioned authority frequently, dismissive of curriculum guidelines, challenging an attitude towards established procedures. She clung to these fragments like a drowning person to driftwood. She emphasized the challenging attitude and minimized the brilliant performance. She still failed to see the systemic cruelty of her actions, the institutional bias, the assumption of limitations based on race and class. In her mind, the slight was not systemic. It was solely a personal affront that the student, due to his poor attitude, likely deserved. Her subsequent days became a constant cycle of paranoia and preparation. She started questioning colleagues about MJ, trying to gauge if the story was widespread. She meticulously reviewed her notes for her upcoming meeting with the CipherNet team regarding the curriculum integration. She polished her demeanor, rehearsing polite, professional, and slightly patronizing phrases of congratulation. Her mental state wasn't geared towards remorse or a sincere apology. It was for a defense, a comprehensive argument designed to prove that her actions were not malicious, but pedagogically sound. She was preparing for a performance review by a committee of one, the former student whose future she had tried to cap, and who now held her school's, and perhaps her own, fate in his hands. Ms. Vance was ready to face the shadow, armed with the brittle shield of her professional pride. The moment of the first direct confrontation was meticulously engineered by Marcus Johnson. It wasn't a casual encounter. It was an obligatory professional necessity. The meeting was ostensibly about the final specifications for the new tech lab, the centerpiece of Project Bridge at Northwood High. The setting was the school's small, utilitarian library conference room, a space usually reserved for low-stakes administrative reviews. Today, the atmosphere was charged with high-stakes corporate energy. The room was overcrowded with the CipherNet implementation team, young, sharp engineers with expensive laptops, and a handful of grateful, slightly overwhelmed Northwood administrators. Ms. Vance, as the chair of the school's curriculum committee, was required to attend. This mandatory participation was the precise mechanism MJ had relied upon. She had dressed with unusual care, donning her stiffest navy blazer and her most professional demeanor, a desperate attempt to fortify her crumbling psychological defenses. She lingered near the doorway, attempting to shrink her presence, hoping to remain an anonymous figure in the bureaucratic background. The effort was futile. The room was too small, but more critically, MJ's presence was too large. The door swung open precisely 10 minutes after the meeting began, and the room instantly snapped to attention. MJ entered, accompanied only by his chief of staff, a subtle display of supreme confidence. He offered a brief, polite nod to the principal and walked straight to the head of the table, displacing the chief technology officer who had been running the meeting. MJ did not make eye contact with Ms. Vance. He treated her and the entire high school staff as a peripheral audience. He began speaking immediately, taking command of the technical discussion. He was detailing specifications for cutting-edge graphical workstations, secure cloud computing servers, and virtual reality development kits. His language was fluid, authoritative, and utterly impenetrable to most of the teachers present. He spoke of low-latency access, petabytes of data, storage, and multi-GPU acceleration, terms that emphasized the astronomical gulf between his reality and the school's previous standard of a handful of decade-old PCs. Ms. Vance watched him from the shadows of the doorway. Her breath held tight. He was no longer the lanky, slightly awkward boy of 2008. The years had stripped away all traces of boyishness, leaving behind a man of deliberate, unshakable power. His voice was calm, measured, and authoritative, projecting a confidence that was less about volume and more about the absolute certainty of his own genius and wealth. Every word he spoke was a direct, silent refutation of her judgment. The humiliation for Ms. Vance was multi-layered. First, there was the spectacle of his success, which felt like a personal insult delivered in the form of a $50 million investment. Second, there was the chilling sense of invisibility. He was treating her not as a person, but as part of the institutional furniture, confirming his complete professional indifference to her existence, a power dynamic far more devastating than anger. She forced herself to focus on the technical details, hoping to appear engaged, but her mind was a whirlwind of practiced defenses. I was trying to protect him. It was a different time. I was misunderstood. She was desperate for an opening to insert her prepared conciliatory remarks. But MJ never ceded the floor. He spent nearly 30 minutes defining the future of the lab, ensuring the Northwood administrators understood the gift they were receiving was not charity, but a strategic partnership with specific, high-level expectations. Finally, the presentation concluded. Papers shuffled, laptops snapped shut, and the administrative staff clustered around MJ, eager to offer effusive thanks and shake his hand. Ms. Vance knew this was her moment. She could either approach him or retreat back into the hallway. But the fear of appearing unprofessional, of shirking her duties as committee chair, held her hostage. As the room began to empty, MJ turned away from the principal, seemingly by chance, and his eyes locked onto Ms. Vance. It wasn't a sudden, startled recognition, but a slow, cold, decisive recognition that had been waiting for this precise moment. There was no anger, no visible trace of the hatred or rage she might have expected from the boy she humiliated. Instead, his gaze held a glacial indifference, laced with a subtle, chilling triumph. It was the look of a scientist observing a controlled experiment reaching its inevitable conclusion. He began the exchange, his voice perfectly even, devoid of any discernible emotion. Adding to the psychological chill, "Good evening, Ms. Vance," he said. He used her full title, a professional formality that served only to underscore his new status as her superior. A tide of heat rushed to her face, an involuntary physical manifestation of shame. She stammered out her rehearsed lines, trying to sound gracious and appreciative. Hello, Mr. Johnson. It's truly wonderful what you're doing for Northwood. The students..." MJ cut her off, not with a word, but with a slight polite tilt of his head, indicating he was allowing her the floor, but only briefly. He then delivered the precise surgical blow she had feared. "Yes, Ms. Vance, I am doing it," he said, meeting her gaze steadily. "I believe in encouraging dreams. That's the core mission of CipherNet, even when those dreams are considered ambitious." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. Then he delivered the final, devastating sentence, his voice dropping slightly, the words carefully enunciated. Even the billion-dollar ones that might seem far-fetched to some people. He emphasized the last two words, far-fetched, with a subtle, devastating inflection, echoing her exact sentiment from 9 years ago. She swallowed hard. Her mouth was suddenly dry. All her prepared defenses, the self-justifications, the apologies, vaporized. She knew the conversation was over. He hadn't demanded an apology. He hadn't raised his voice. He had simply held up the mirror to her past judgment, with his $1.2 billion valuation standing as the silent, unanswerable witness. The message was clear. I remembered your words. I used them. Now, you are standing in the room that my vision, the one you mocked, has paid for. MJ offered her the briefest, most professional smile imaginable, a CEO acknowledging a minor associate. "Enjoy the new lab, Ms. Vance," he concluded, and then turned away, leaving her standing alone, the weight of his calculated success pressing down on her like a physical force. The true purpose of Project Bridge had been fulfilled in that single, chilling, professional exchange. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the state-of-the-art CipherNet lab was not merely a school event. It was a full-scale media circus meticulously orchestrated by CipherNet's PR department. The exterior of Northwood High, typically drab and unremarkable, was suddenly buzzing with professional energy. Satellite trucks were parked on the lawn, cables snaked across the pavement, and banners proclaiming, "Project Bridge, building the future of Atlanta Tech," hung brightly on the brick facade. The guest list was a testament to MJ's rising influence. Local reporters from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and CNN, state politicians eager for a photo op with a self-made billionaire, and a dense crowd of community leaders and school board members. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint from the newly renovated wing and the palpable electricity of expectation. Ms. Vance, dressed conservatively and looking drawn, stood stiffly near the back of the reserved seating area for faculty. She was acutely aware of the cameras, but even more so of the silent, powerful presence of Marcus Johnson. She felt like an unwanted historical artifact at a futuristic exhibition. Her heart hammered against her ribs, recognizing that she was merely a prop in his grand narrative, but a necessary one. She was the shadow in the spotlight. Then MJ stepped up to the podium. He was a portrait of success, a man in full command of his destiny and his audience. His charisma was quiet but absolute. He didn't boom or gesticulate wildly. His power was in his stillness and the weight of his words. He began by thanking the city and the school, offering generic compliments to the administration. But everyone waited for the turn, the inevitable shift toward the personal. The ensuing speech was a masterpiece of restraint and surgical storytelling. He didn't waste time on technical details. He spoke about the universal human experience of ambition and doubt. "This lab," MJ began, his voice amplified perfectly by the sound system, "is not about the hardware. It's about a fundamental commitment to empowerment. It's about building a space where every young mind, regardless of their background or zip code, can see potential where the outside world has traditionally only seen limits." He transitioned seamlessly, his voice taking on a lower, more intimate timbre, drawing the entire audience into his confidence. He spoke about the struggles of his youth, the long hours coding in the dark, and the isolation of dreaming a future no one around him understood. He never used her name, yet the tension in the room became palpable, a collective energy focusing on the unknown figure who had once represented the barrier to his success. Every one of us, as we grow, encounters a figure, perhaps a mentor, perhaps a teacher in our lives who tries to realistic-ize us, MJ declared. He paused, his eyes sweeping slowly across the audience, finally settling on the faculty section where Ms. Vance was almost visibly flinching. He continued, the silence amplifying the weight of his accusation. "Someone who told us, maybe with a laugh, maybe with a concerned nod, that our vision was too big, that we belonged in a certain box, that we should settle for a solid job, instead of reaching for the revolutionary." At this, Ms. Vance felt the full, searing heat of the public spotlight. Even though no camera was explicitly trained on her, she knew several of her colleagues, aware of her history with the name Marcus Johnson, were looking at her sideways. The air around her seemed to vibrate with the unspoken context. MJ's eyes remained pointedly fixed on the area where she stood. "I am here today to tell the young people of Northwood High, and anyone else who has been told they are not enough, do not listen to them. Their judgment," he emphasized, raising his hand slightly, "is simply a reflection of their own fear of the unknown. Their doubt is their limit, not yours. Their laughter is not your truth." He concluded with the mantra of the modern disruptor. "I urge you to take that doubt, take that ridicule, and turn their doubt into your venture capital. Let their low expectations be the energy source that propels you past every single one of their prescribed limits." The crowd erupted in applause, a standing ovation driven by the sheer emotional power of the message, the ultimate American underdog story culminating in triumph. The speech was a devastatingly effective act of professional vindication. He had not just achieved success, he had weaponized the very memory of his failure. As the applause slowly subsided and the principal stepped forward for the ribbon-cutting photo, MJ performed his final, crucial, choreographed act. Ignoring the swarm of well-wishers and the outstretched hands of the politicians, he smoothly descended the steps of the podium. He bypassed the entire official receiving line and headed straight for Ms. Vance. It was a slow, deliberate march across the gym floor, every step a measure of the 9-year journey. Ms. Vance felt a sudden, terrifying clarity. She was cornered. She had been publicly indicted, implicitly, and now the judge was approaching to deliver the final verdict. Ms. Vance knew she couldn't escape. She was physically trapped among her peers and psychologically trapped by his success. She was standing on his stage and the spotlight was about to narrow to just the two of them. She braced herself for the inevitable, brutal encounter that would settle the score once and for all. The gymnasium, still echoing with applause, suddenly felt vast and empty to Ms. Vance. Marcus Johnson, the symbol of the impossible dream she had mocked, stood directly before her. He cut through the remaining well-wishers and the school principal who was attempting a diplomatic introduction. He offered a social smile devoid of any genuine warmth, a practiced gesture of corporate affability that was chillingly impersonal. "Ms. Vance, I need a private moment with you," MJ said, his tone authoritative and entirely professional. He didn't ask. He stated a requirement regarding the final sign-off for the new facility's operational guidelines. The premise was entirely false, but it provided an unassailable professional shield. Ms. Vance, sensing the inevitable, found herself nodding automatically. She had no choice but to follow him. The eyes of her colleagues, now focused intently on their exchange, were enough to force her compliance. MJ led her swiftly out of the gymnasium's festive noise and into a small, empty storage room nearby, a cramped, fluorescent-lit space filled with discarded gym equipment. The contrast between the grandeur of the ceremony and the sterile isolation of this room was jarring, making the confrontation feel even more intimate and surgical. Once the door clicked shut, Ms. Vance immediately launched into her prepared defense. Her heart pounded violently, but she clung to her professional facade. "Marcus, I have to say, I'm just so proud of what you've accomplished. It's truly inspirational. You know, sometimes as teachers, especially in the public school system, we have a duty to temper idealism with practical reality. We try to set achievable expectations." She was attempting to frame her past ridicule as responsible pedagogy, a necessary corrective. She offered the word proud, an ironic term of endearment, hoping to reset the power dynamic to one of teacher and former student. MJ raised a hand, a subtle but absolute gesture that cut her off mid-sentence. The gesture was not aggressive, but final. He looked at her not with anger, but with an exhausting, clear-eyed focus that stripped away all her pretense. "You don't need to be proud, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice calm, measured, and dangerously quiet. "And you certainly don't need to apologize or rationalize your past decisions with me. That's not why we're here." He took a slow, deliberate step closer, maintaining a professional distance that felt impossibly vast. "I didn't bring you here for absolution. I brought you here for clarity." His next words landed like perfectly aimed darts, each one a memory plucked from the file he had carried for years. "I remember exactly what you said," he stated, his voice losing any remaining professional politeness, yet maintaining its unnerving control. "Plumbing school or IT technician? A solid job, MJ. You spoke about stability. You spoke about my limitations." He paused, letting the full weight of the memory crush the flimsy defense she had just attempted. "I haven't forgotten. That memory isn't a scar, Ms. Vance. It's the cornerstone of CipherNet." He revealed the true source of his engine. "I set the billion-dollar target before the age of 30, just as I claimed, in part because of that laugh. It wasn't the code that drove me every night. It was the need to ensure that when I returned, my success would be so large, so undeniable, that it would retroactively make your professional judgment look catastrophically wrong." Ms. Vance felt her entire body tremble. The composure she had carefully maintained for decades finally broke. Tears welled up, driven by a mixture of shock, fear, and a painful, reluctant glimmer of genuine regret. The man standing before her wasn't a student. He was an unstoppable force, and she was confronted with the magnitude of her error. I deeply apologize if I was wrong," she stammered, the words forced past a tight throat. She reverted to her last desperate plea for understanding. I was just concerned for you, Marcus. I know the world is difficult, especially for people of color with big dreams. The world is not easy. You're right, Ms. Vance, MJ interjected, his voice hardening slightly. It's not easy. But that's precisely the point. The world is shaped by people who refuse to accept limits, especially the ones imposed by others. You saw the difficulty in prescribed surrender. You taught me the wrong lesson. He then articulated the core philosophy forged in that moment of humiliation. You taught me that real success isn't about money or innovation. It's about proving the doubters wrong. Money is currency, but vindication is power. I was not destined for a solid job, Ms. Vance. I was destined to create thousands of solid jobs where you insisted there were none. He looked her directly in the eyes, his gaze penetrating and final. And you were my greatest doubter. This wasn't an argument he wanted to win. It was a truth he wanted her to own. He wasn't asking her to admit fault. He just wanted her to bear witness, to feel the full, crushing weight of his $1.2 billion triumph in the confines of that small, humiliating room. MJ then made his final, most chilling point, connecting her past failure to her present role in Project Bridge. The reason you are now spending countless hours implementing a curriculum built by my company is not because you were the best teacher, but because your school desperately needed the resources I control. Every student who uses one of those new workstations is a silent message to you, confirming that the ceiling you tried to place on me was merely the floor of my ambition. He took a step back, the exchange complete. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual operational guidelines to review. The lab is set to open next week. He opened the door, allowing the noise of the celebratory crowd to rush in. Ms. Vance was left standing alone, emotionally dismantled, facing the stark reality that her former student had not just succeeded, he had meticulously calculated her role in his victory. The shockwaves from the private confrontation in the Northwood storage room faded, but the change it signaled did not. Ms. Vance, reeling from the realization of her error, retreated into a shell of professionalism, meticulously avoiding MJ's team members while simultaneously implementing every guideline they set. The lab construction proceeded at a blistering pace, a constant, physical reminder of the power her former student wielded. A few weeks after the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the second shoe dropped, a move orchestrated by MJ that was less about philanthropy and more about the final, decisive act of psychological warfare. MJ formally announced the second phase of Project Bridge, the CipherNet Fellowship Program. This initiative was a stroke of genius, both for CipherNet's public relations and for MJ's personal mission. It was billed as a program to bridge the practical skills gap, offering high-paying, year-long mentorship positions within CipherNet's Atlanta headquarters. The fellowship was open to one educator from each participating school and was designed to focus exclusively on teachers who demonstrated a strong, documented commitment to STEM education and curriculum integration. The program was a brilliant leveraging of corporate necessity. CipherNet gained experienced educators who could immediately help refine its training platforms and curriculum for broader application, while simultaneously gaining access to highly skilled talent. For the teachers, it was an unimaginable opportunity, a year's sabbatical from the grinding low pay of public education, a massive salary increase, and a chance to work on the cutting edge of technology. It was a perfectly clever philanthropic initiative that also served to poach top teachers away from struggling schools, demonstrating MJ's ruthless efficiency. The selection process was touted as entirely data-driven, meritocratic, and objective. CipherNet developed a proprietary educator efficacy algorithm that factored in years of service, involvement in curriculum design, professional development hours, especially in STEM fields, and crucially, seniority and administrative leadership roles within the school. This objective veneer was essential for MJ's plan. MJ had not coded the algorithm to select Ms. Vance. He didn't have to. He had subtly tuned the weighting parameters to prioritize high seniority, long-term curriculum chair involvement, and extensive, if outdated, experience, criteria that naturally funneled the selection pool toward Ms. Vance's specific, long-standing profile. He had engineered the system to ensure she would be selected for an interview, using the very logic of objective data analysis that his billion-dollar company was founded upon. The email arrived in Ms. Vance's inbox during a Tuesday afternoon planning session. It was sleekly designed, bearing the professional, authoritative CipherNet logo. It formally informed Northwood High that, based on the performance indicators and data submitted by the administration, Ms. Eleanor Vance had been identified as a leading candidate and had been selected for a formal interview for the CipherNet Fellowship Program. The message landed on Ms. Vance with a dizzying mix of panic and morbid fascination. The dread of the ribbon-cutting returned, intensified now by the professional requirement to engage. She wrestled with the decision. To refuse the interview would be to risk alienating the school's primary benefactor and confirm her attitude problem to her superiors. To accept meant walking willingly into the lion's den, into the very presence of the man she had insulted, now in the position of her potential employer. Her internal monologue was a chaotic battle between pride and necessity. "I don't need his charity," her pride screamed. But her practical reality whispered, "This is a year of actual financial security. This is retirement money." She was tired, nearing the end of a taxing career, and the thought of a year without fighting over textbook budgets was overwhelmingly tempting. The salary increase alone was transformative. Ultimately, the sheer pressure of the situation, the mandatory involvement required by the school administration, coupled with her own professional curiosity and financial need, compelled her. She would face him, but she would do so with dignity, prepared to treat the encounter as a simple professional formality. Meanwhile, back at the CipherNet tower, MJ reviewed the candidate list. His HR manager, a meticulous professional who operated strictly by the metrics, was entirely unaware of their shared history. She simply reported, "The Northwood candidate, Ms. Vance, scored highest on the seniority and curriculum involvement factors. Scheduling her interview for the end of the week, sir." MJ offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. He did not smile, but a cold sense of satisfaction settled over him. This was the final, perfect turn of the screw. He wasn't just wealthy. He had become her opportunity, her necessity, and her judge. MJ wanted her in his office, not as a respected educator receiving a reward, but as a supplicant candidate, a professional petitioner who needed his sanction and his wealth. It was the apex of professional revenge. The boy told to seek a solid job was now forcing the woman who told him that to apply for one, effectively asking him to validate her worth. The stage was now moved from the dusty confines of room 204 to the gleaming glass throne room of the billion-dollar empire built from her doubt. The score was about to be settled in the currency of power and position. Ms. Eleanor Vance's journey to the CipherNet tower was a pilgrimage into a world she had implicitly taught her students to regard as impossible. The drive downtown, from the worn brick of Northwood to the gleaming steel heart of Atlanta's new financial district, was a physical manifestation of the immense gap between her reality and Marcus Johnson's. The CipherNet tower was a monument to unapologetic luxury, a sleek glass monolith that commanded the sky. The lobby was a cathedral of polished granite and minimalist art, overseen by security personnel whose quiet efficiency spoke of high salaries and absolute control. Ms. Vance felt instantly intimidated. Her sensible 20-year-old shoes squeaked slightly on the immaculate floor, a jarring sound in the corporate silence. She was ushered into the waiting room, a lounge furnished with designer pieces and offering panoramic views of the city. Here, the psychological pressure intensified. She was surrounded by the young tech professionals of CipherNet, sharp, diverse, impossibly confident individuals who looked like they were barely old enough to drive, yet they were discussing venture capital, algorithmic trading, and data ethics with casual ease. They were all far above her, a poorly paid public school teacher who felt every year of her 2 decades of service weighing on her shoulders. She was a relic sitting in the future. When her name was called, she was led through the sprawling, open-plan offices, a buzzing hub of innovation that contrasted starkly with the quiet, dusty halls of Northwood. She was finally shown into the executive interview suite. MJ was sitting there, alone, behind a massive, translucent glass desk that made him look like a commanding figure floating in space. The room was simple, dominated by a breathtaking view and an air of quiet, expensive power. The first immediate psychological blow was struck by his attire. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit like the one from the ribbon cutting. Instead, he wore a simple charcoal gray CipherNet hoodie, the company logo subtly embroidered on the chest. It was the uniform of the billionaire coder, and it was identical in type to the faded hoodies he had worn in her classroom in high school. It was a deliberate, powerful statement, A quiet declaration that he was still the same Marcus Johnson, only now he owned the room, the company, and, momentarily, her professional fate. He did not offer her a handshake or a seat immediately. He let her stand for a crucial few seconds, absorbing the overwhelming shift in power. When she finally sat, the interview began. Immediately cold and professional, MJ, holding a slim folder containing her application and resume, began questioning her about her management skills, her curriculum experience, and her vision for tech education. He was articulate, relentless, and utterly detached. He treated her not as an individual with a past, but as a data set he needed to analyze. Ms. Vance answered with a profound sense of trepidation. Her answers felt stale, her experience suddenly obsolete against the backdrop of his cutting-edge empire. She felt the heavy scrutiny of not just a CEO assessing a candidate, but a judge cross-examining a defendant. Every word was weighed against the laughter of 9 years ago. For nearly 20 minutes, he allowed the professional charade to continue, forcing her to sell herself and her decades of underpaid service to the institution he now generously funded. Finally, the charade ended. MJ put the folder down on the glass desk with a soft, final thud. He leaned back slightly, the formality draining from the air, replaced by an intense personal focus. "Ms. Vance," he began, his voice dropping to the low conversational tone that always carried immense weight. "Let's be honest. We both know this is not a normal interview. You didn't apply because you suddenly found a passion for blockchain security." He met her eyes directly. "Do you recall the last time we spoke about a large-scale project?" "Not the lab, Ms. Vance. The last personal project." The question, so direct and precise, shattered her remaining composure. The professional facade crumbled. She felt tears welling up, not just from shame, but from the exhausting futility of her pretense. "I do, Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I remember. I am deeply sorry for that, Marcus. It was a mistake. I truly thought I was offering sound, realistic advice." MJ shook his head slowly, a gesture of intellectual disagreement, not anger. "It wasn't a mistake, Ms. Vance. Not for me. It was a reflection of the systemic barriers and small-minded thinking that try to cap potential based on appearance and background." He rose slowly to his feet, a powerful figure dominating the glass-walled room. "And it created something. You gave me a definitive, quantifiable goal. You gave me the fuel I needed to build this entire building, this company, this dream." He looked down at her, the final confrontation reaching its apex. "Now look where we are. You are sitting here, interviewing to be my employee. A teacher who publicly laughed at my billion-dollar dream is now seeking financial support from the company I built on that dream. It was the ultimate statement of professional triumph, a perfect, non-violent vengeance." MJ walked around the desk, stopping at the edge of the glass. "I'm not interviewing you to hire you, Ms. Vance. I haven't needed a world history teacher to help run a technology empire. I'm interviewing you to close a chapter." His final words were delivered not with spite, but with chilling finality, a testament to his victory. "I want you to walk out of this building today knowing, with absolute certainty, that every limit you placed on me was shattered by me. Not quietly, but with a public, undeniable success that ensures you can never place that limit on another student again." He extended his hand, not for a handshake, but for a simple gesture of dismissal. The interview was over. He had demanded her witness, and she had been forced to provide it. The score was finally settled. The interview in the CipherNet tower was not a transaction. It was a psychological purification. Marcus Johnson had achieved his complete professional and personal vindication. The final act, however, was not one of scorched earth destruction, but of calculated, corrective grace. MJ did not hire Ms. Vance. That was never the intention. Nor was it practical for a cutting-edge tech firm. The goal was to dismantle her worldview, not to offer her a job. But MJ did something that surprised even his own chief of staff, a move that demonstrated his ultimate power, the ability to define the terms of his enemy's peace. He announced a new separate allocation under Project Bridge, the CipherNet Educator Endowment. This fund was designed to provide a substantial, immediate retirement package for Northwood's long-serving STEM teachers, offering a necessary financial bridge for those trapped in the low-ceiling compensation of public education. Crucially, the package was extended to Ms. Vance, ensuring her immediate financial security. However, it came with a meticulously crafted condition. She was required to agree to a 1-year consulting training program, not in coding, but in understanding unconscious bias in the classroom. This requirement was non-negotiable and designed not to punish but to educate. The package was large enough that, despite the humiliating condition, it represented a life-altering opportunity she could not refuse. MJ's strategy was clear. He didn't want to destroy her. He wanted to correct her. A firing or a forced public exposure would have turned her into a martyr and diluted his message. By funding her transition and stipulating the consulting, he forced her to actively confront the very biases that had fueled his success. She had to acknowledge the systemic failure she represented before she could accept her freedom. Ms. Vance accepted. The sheer exhaustion of fighting the system, combined with the undeniable financial relief, outweighed the final pangs of her professional pride. She understood, with a painful clarity she had never possessed before, that her old notions of realism were not tough love, but a reflection of her own limited vision, a form of institutional gatekeeping. She began the consulting program under the watchful eye of a diversity and inclusion specialist. She never spoke of the interview in the glass tower, burying the memory under layers of professionalism and newfound introspection. When her colleagues asked about the fellowship, she simply offered a terse, professional non-answer. Mr. Johnson and I agreed that my skill set was best utilized in a different capacity, which led to a generous retirement opportunity. Her departure from Northwood High was handled with the appropriate level of public respect. There was a small ceremony attended by grateful colleagues and students who knew nothing of the private warfare that led to her early exit. They celebrated her long service, oblivious to the fact that her retirement fund was paid by the same man whose dream she had once laughed at. With her new, unexpected financial freedom and the painful, corrective knowledge gained from her consulting year, Ms. Vance did something that cemented her transformation. She used a significant portion of her retirement money, the money paid by CipherNet, born from the billion-dollar dream, to establish a small scholarship fund. In a final act of self-aware irony and genuine atonement, she named it the Realism Fund. The scholarship was dedicated not to high-achieving traditional students, but specifically to those with unrealistically big dreams, students proposing unconventional, disruptive, and seemingly impossible projects. She had learned her lesson. Her realism was redefined. It wasn't about lowering the ceiling, but about recognizing that the world's most powerful realities are created by those who dare to ignore the limits set by others. As for MJ, his focus shifted entirely from vindication to legacy. CipherNet continued its expansion at an aggressive pace, its success becoming a constant feature in the global tech landscape. He was no longer just a tech billionaire. He was a cultural icon, a role model for entrepreneurs of color and anyone who felt marginalized by the system. He used his story, his platform, and his wealth not to boast, but to continue empowering others. His public messaging was disciplined and resonant, always returning to the core principle forged in Room 204. The greatest success was not beating the competition, but overcoming the doubt of those who should have believed in you. His victory over Ms. Vance was systemic. It was about ensuring that the institutional laughter of the past would no longer drown out the ambitious whispers of the future. He had used his anger to build his empire, and now he was using his empire to dismantle the root cause of that anger, forging a legacy defined by both fierce ambition and profound corrective action. 5 years later, the CipherNet Tower now stood as a solid permanent fixture on the Atlanta skyline, no longer a novelty, but a staple of the city's economic identity. Marcus Johnson was firmly established, not just as a technology CEO, but as a public intellectual whose opinions shaped policy and culture. CipherNet's educational initiatives had expanded globally, proving that Project Bridge was not a one-off charitable act but a core component of the company's mission. The need for confrontation had long passed. Ms. Vance had settled quietly into her unexpected retirement, her realism fund now a small, functional, and deeply ironic part of the Northwood scholarship landscape. The score had been settled, and the chapter had been closed. Yet a final, necessary return was due. This time there were no cameras, no reporters, no politicians, just MJ. He drove his modest, unmarked vehicle to Northwood High on a chilly Friday afternoon, slipping in through a side entrance, acknowledged only by a young administrator who knew him simply as Mr. Johnson, our biggest benefactor. He simply showed up to sit in on a workshop being run by one of his former CipherNet fellows, a dynamic young teacher named Jasmine who had brought back not just coding knowledge, but the Silicon Valley ethos of relentless innovation. He wanted to observe the true, lasting impact of his investment, unvarnished by public performance. He walked the familiar yet subtly altered hallway toward the mathematics wing. The walls were still red brick, but the posters were new, featuring images of famous Black and Latino figures in STEM. The most powerful change, however, was in the atmosphere. The air of weary resignation was gone, replaced by a low, consistent hum of creative activity. He stopped outside room 204, the old world history room. The bronze plaque on the door now read, the CipherNet Digital Engineering Lab. The room itself was unrecognizable. It was buzzing with focused, energetic activity. Gone were the rows of desks and the faint, dusty smell of textbooks. The space was filled with ergonomic chairs, multiple large monitors, and specialized equipment. The students, a vibrant, diverse mix of Black and Latino teenagers, were utterly engrossed in their work. The glow from the computer screens reflected on their faces, illuminating not just the code, but the concentration and excitement that transcended any social barrier. There were no dusty textbooks. Instead, the lab featured banks of 3D printers whirring softly, small programmable robots zipping across a testing mat, and whiteboards covered not in dates and historical names, but in complex algorithms and flowcharts. It was a factory of the future, housed in a shell of the past. MJ leaned against the doorframe, observing for several minutes, invisible to the engrossed students. This site was the ultimate fulfillment of his ambition, more potent than any billion-dollar valuation. The room had not just been refitted. It had been re-engineered to foster possibility. The young teacher, Jasmine, finally noticed him and offered a quiet nod. MJ walked into the room, his presence barely causing a ripple. As he moved toward one cluster of workstations, one student, a young black boy with glasses and the unmistakable intensity that MJ recognized instantly, looked up, his fingers poised over the keyboard. This was the boldest student coder, the one whose intellectual ambition couldn't be contained by the room. The boy didn't stammer or fawn. He spoke with the easy confidence of someone who knows his ideas have intrinsic value. "Hello, Mr. Johnson," the student said, acknowledging his presence matter-of-factly. "I'm trying to write an algorithm to predict traffic patterns on Peachtree Street by analyzing real-time data from city buses and local drone feeds. I think I can build a billion-dollar company to solve that." The words hung in the air, the exact outrageous claim 9 years later in the very same room. But this time it was delivered not with teenage arrogance, but with calm, informed conviction. MJ felt a deep, profound sense of peace wash over him. His lips curled into a warm smile, utterly devoid of bitterness or irony. The internal wound, which had powered his empire, was finally and fully healed. "That is an excellent idea," MJ said, crouching down slightly to meet the student at eye level, making his voice personal and direct. He didn't offer to fund him immediately. He offered him the final, most crucial lesson. "But remember this," MJ stated, his eyes sweeping across the entire lab, making the statement for every student in the room. "Never let anyone realistikize your dream. Don't let their fear of risk define your scope. You have the tools now. Use them." He stood up, his voice ringing with a conviction that surpassed his previous corporate authority. "Be bigger than this room, bigger than this city, bigger than any laugh you ever hear. Let that doubt be the metric you continuously exceed." He walked toward the door, his mission complete. He didn't mention Ms. Vance. He didn't have to. The new purpose of room 204 was the living eulogy for her obsolete worldview. She was, precisely and finally, a footnote in his story now, a necessary obstacle that had served its purpose and faded. MJ walked out of Northwood High, leaving the hum of the computers behind him. He no longer carried the burden of that laughter. He had turned it into a billion-dollar company, yes, and he had turned the humiliation into a legacy of empowerment. But most importantly, he had fundamentally changed the room where it all began, transforming a prison of low expectation into a launchpad for boundless ambition. The silence now reigning within him was the true sound of his final, perfect victory.